Welcome, everyone. My name is Ramses Out. I am community manager at Logseq. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into one of my processes that I run completely within Logseq, and that is writing the Logseq newsletter. Even though the newsletter launched this week, I sent the first edition out on Monday. I've been using this process for over 50 newsletter editions for other newsletters that I've written in the past. I love to write newsletters. I used to have a personal newsletter that I would send every 2 weeks about everything that I learned, but also in my corporate jobs in the past, when I was running projects, I was basically writing newsletters to give updates to stakeholders, to project members, but also outsiders, so they could see where we were in a project and what were our learnings. So no matter your use case, if you have to collect resources or notes or any type of information and share it with others in a distilled format, this workflow will probably be very useful for you. I've called it how to write a curated newsletter using Logseq. In my case, curated means resources. It means the updates, like the new features that we add to Logseq, themes, plugins. So from different sources, I pulled together interesting information to be shared in a distilled package, namely a newsletter. But again, this can be anything. And if we have time, I also want to showcase very quickly how to basically build a workflow to take notes related to a specific project, to distill different parts of those notes, like the notes themselves or the action points, and then how to distill that in a handy format. So we'll take about 40 minutes to demo this. Throughout, I will be answering questions. So for people watching this later, there's a live chat, and I will be monitoring the chat. So throughout the session, I will be answering some questions from the attendees. We're now with 24 people. And I am curious, before we get started, who already sends a newsletter? And again, newsletter is a broad term in this case. So do you run a project at work that you have to give regular updates for to other people within a company or your department? I would really love to know that. So please put that in the chat, because it also helps me to maybe steer the session a little bit in a different ways. For example, if there are many people writing a curated newsletter about their hobby or about some other topic that you're interested in, I can focus more on that. If there are more people working on projects and taking notes from those projects or from those meetings, or having action points, I can focus a little bit more of the session on that. So please put that in the chat. That will help me. But let's get started with why write a curated newsletter. I already said a little bit in the introduction. What I liked when I was writing my personal newsletter was that it acted as a forcing function. So I have many interests, but my main interest is basically learning how to learn, becoming better at acquiring new skills. One of the skills that I'm acquiring now is centered around web development. So I'm teaching myself HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript, and I have a very concrete goal. Always when I'm learning skills. So my personal newsletter was centered about that. So I would write about the things that I had read that week about learning, but then also the actual stuff that I had learned. So it was really a good forcing function and a review mechanism in one. So by writing about what I learned in the past 2 weeks since sending the previous newsletter, I would look back at what I had achieved, which is very motivating. But it can also be a work project, like I said in the introduction. Then the question obviously arises, why would you use Logseq for this? Why not use any other tool? I believe that Logseq can basically help you with this entire process for a few reasons, and I will make the text a little bit bigger. So Logseq is like the entering information into Logseq is very frictionless, especially when you only use the journals page, or if you use the journals page for most of the things that you do. it's so easy to just between your day-to-day activities, fire off a template, jot down some things, save a link, whatever. But it makes it easy to enter the information, and it's also when you use the templates of Logseq, the structure is already built in, and structuring your notes is very important if you want to actually use them. Because if I look at my previous ways of taking notes, for example, in Evernote or even just Apple Notes, I wouldn't have a structure or a system, or I wouldn't have the habits to review those notes. So basically it would become a black hole or a graveyard for notes to die. And by using templates, by using a forcing function like sending a regular newsletter, I am forced to revisit my notes. And by using templates, which we'll see later, it really becomes frictionless to enter information and directly structure it. And so the reason is frictionless entry, easy retrieval using queries, which we'll see in a bit. And then it's very easy to export your notes out of Logseq. And there are many ways, and we'll look at a few today. So let's have a look at the chat. I am really curious how you use or how, if you have newsletter currently. I see Toby mentioned he has a personal one. Farah also has a personal newsletter. Evo, very interesting. I write a newsletter for a corporate community of practice. So yeah, a community of practice, that is also, I would say, a use case. So it's not just basically an audience for yourself or a department for yourself, but it can also be a small community of practice. So maybe you're a consultant in a specific domain, or in my previous corporate job, for example, I was connecting with other people in the recruitment, like in other recruitment departments in other companies, to share tips and tricks about tools to use, processes to use, integrations. And in that sense, you can also connect with fellow experts in your domain, learn from them. And that is also a very good application of having a newsletter. Basically, the process to write a newsletter, or basically write any curated piece of information, as I see it, is you collect resources or notes. So this is basically entry points. You set up a template. Normally setting up a template goes first, but you first need to start collecting stuff before you see, okay, is this worth turning into a process? In my case, I've already been writing a newsletter for several years. I know what are basically the steps in writing a newsletter. So I started when I migrated to Logseq, I started with a template. But most people they start to collect resources, they start to collect notes or insights about something, and then over time, you'll see, okay, now I want to share this. Now I want to actually share my knowledge, or I want to get more input from people. So by broadcasting out what I know, hopefully more people will connect with me and will steer me in useful directions. That is definitely something that happened to me when I started to write more about tools for thought. That is how I got this job in the end as a community manager. So it can go many ways. Then obviously, once you have collected resources or notes, you want to retrieve them. So that is what we'll look at. We'll look at the writing process and then publishing from Logseq. So I see we have about 25 minutes left. So we'll try to spend about 5 minutes per topic. Some topics will take less time, like for example, publishing, and I will spend some more time on setting up the template and retrieving the resources. So, but let's get started with collecting resources. So first, what are resources? Could be highlights. That's how it started out. I would just send a personal newsletter with the most interesting highlights that I had found that week. And I would tag any highlight with a specific tag and maybe turn it into a to-do. So that is the first way to collect resources. Nowadays, if you look at the Logseq newsletter, you'll see that much of the content are just links to other content. So that is really the purest form of curated newsletter, I think there is. And I will show you my process of collecting those links and then mentioning them in the newsletter. But also notes for meetings can be resources. So again, to go back to the project leader use case, maybe you have some action points that need to be shared with a team. That is also a resource. Then how to collect resources using templates, and the templates you should use on the journals page. This is very important, I believe, because whenever you write something on the journals page in Logseq, it will be tagged with that date, and that will allow us to do some cool things with queries, like retrieve all the notes or all the action points from the last week, for example, or the past month, or maybe the past year. You can go wild with some dynamic variables. And then you need to make sure that queries can find what you enter into your graph into Logseq. And that is basically why you should use templates on the journals page. So we'll dive into that in a sec. But first, template. So before we enter anything, let's build a template. And I'm just going to build a template live. This is a relatively fresh graph that I've created here with some sample data, but I haven't set up a template yet. So what I will do, I will create a page templates. You can use any name that you like. I just like to have all of my templates on one page and then write them there. All right, and let's see. I want to open it in the sidebar. Okay, so setting up a template. First, we need to decide on a simple structure. So you don't have to go wild with tags or properties, but I do recommend use a unique combination of tags or properties. This is to avoid noise in your queries and to make sure that you only get the results in your queries that are relevant to the newsletter or the packet of information that you need to send. So we'll just get started with the template. Personally, I like to make every resource that I enter a to-do. And we'll see a little bit later why that is useful, because it will make managing the query much easier. So I start with the keyword to-do to turn this block into a to-do. And then I have an area in my graph called Logseq. So this is a to-do for the area called Logseq, and it's for the newsletter. I see it's a little bit hidden, but here we have hashtag newsletter, and it's a resource. All right, and then I add a placeholder bold, like this is markdown to bold, so title goes here, and that is basically the structure. So, and I'll show in a bit what it actually looks like. But when I encounter something that I want to share as a resource in the Logseq newsletter, I will capture that using this template on the journals page. And I'll show in a little bit what that looks like. So now, before we can use this, now I need to turn this into a template. So I right click on the bullet, I click make template, and then what's the template's name? I call it newsletter resource. And personally, I like to have abbreviations. So I do NR as a abbreviation. Question is, include the parent block in the template? Yes, because I am going to use, and I need this bit, I need these tags and this property to actually retrieve these blocks. So yes, it has to be The parent block has to be part of the template. So now we have a template, and I can run this on the main page. So I do /template, and then you see already the first result is the newsletter resource. That's because there's only one template in this graph. In my personal graph, I have a very long list of templates, and that's why I use this little abbreviation. So between the parentheses, I have NR, so I can just type NR, hit enter, and the template will fire. So now, normally I would say, for example, here, Logseq community hub that I want to share in the newsletter, and then I have the link. And maybe here, some text describing the resource. Sometimes I already write a blurb here, but this is just to very quickly capture stuff. If you look in my personal graph, every day I will have between 3 and 8 to 10 of these entries on my journals page, because I am on Twitter, I am in Discord, and I see useful videos, useful articles. Maybe I see useful snippets. So maybe someone has created a query that is very useful. So then I just type something like this, or a CSS snippet, and then I can store the code here as well. CSS, etc. So I can already capture a lot. I can even take a screenshot from here. For example, can just take a screenshot and then paste it here. And I see I have not set up. This is a new machine. I've not set up that it copies to clipboard. But if you have basically a screenshot set up that it copies to your clipboard, you can just take a screenshot, paste it here. So very simple to collect resources. So this is basically the collection part. We've now set up a template that will later feed into a query. But this is just the first step. Having a way to quickly capture resources or notes or whatever. Like you can use this for everything. This is basically a quick capture device. And the reason I do this with a template is because I don't want to lose these resources. I don't want to spend too much time when it's time to write the newsletter or send out meeting notes or send out action points to retrieve them all. So I want to structure them right away. And instead of thinking of the tags or links on the fly, and again, having the possibility of forgetting maybe a tag, I turn it into a template. I hope that is clear why you should use templates. All right. So we've already seen you need to decide on a very simple structure and add links or properties. So what should you add? Anything that a query can work with, because the template that we're using is really about feeding queries. So I will put this link in the chat. It's the documentation and the capabilities of queries, and we'll be using this in a little bit. But as you can see here, you can do quite some cool stuff searching your notes using queries. And I see I need to speed up a little bit because now we're going to get into the stuff that I think makes this whole process very powerful. Because, you know, entering resources, stuff on your journals page, it's always frictionless. But the question is always, how do you retrieve stuff? And this is also why I think this session is not necessarily about writing a newsletter specifically. It's more about how do I design a process in Logseq. So how do I enter information? How do I structure that information? And then how do I get the output? So we've now already entered and structured the information in one go because we've fired off the template. And then using the tags, we already have created a very simple structure. Now the question is, how do you retrieve it? Well, there are a few ways. I can do it manually. So I can check out the linked references of individual pages. So for example, every resource that I add, I tag it with area/Logseq, newsletter, and resource. So I can go, for example, to the resource page, and I see several resources here. Same way, I can go to the area/Logseq page and get the resources that way. Obviously, that is not ideal because there will be a lot of noise in the linked references, and you want to keep it simple. So you can also use Logseq search functionality, but then again, you will spend a lot of time wading through blocks that are not relevant for you. So that's why you should use queries, I believe. How do you do that? Well, we're just going to do some live coding. But the first step is basically to create a query with the values from the templates. So if you remember, in the template that we've just set up, we have a value to do, we have a value area/Logseq, we have a value newsletter, and we have a value resource. So these are basically 4 identifiers that every block will have that I have not processed. And here you will also see in a bit why I've added this to do, because that enables me to very quickly update a query and to make sure that I do not repeat things that I've already mentioned. And then using, for example, the between symbols. A symbol is basically built-in dynamic placeholder. So for example, 7 days ago, 1 month ago, and I'll just show it. So for example, you can use a filter in queries titled between, and then I can say I want to fetch all the blocks between 2 dates. And here again, we can see why it's so important to use the journals page, because only the journals page, like writing on the journals page, will ensure that you can use the between filter. I hope that makes sense. So let's just build something live. I think that is always the best way to showcase things. I'll go to area/Logseq, and I am going to have a new header called resources. Personally, this is how I like to structure my pages. I have basically headings that are on the root level, so that are not indented. I give them level 1 heading. So underneath, maybe I will have editions with links to other newsletter editions. And as you can see here, I've already created 1 edition, so I'll just add the link here. Let's see, newsletter. Oh, newsletter 1. So I'll just create a little index. Obviously, you can automate this with a query, but no need for the demo right now. So this is basically the main way how I structure these area pages. If you're familiar with building a second brain, the para method, so you have projects, areas, resources, and archives. I use the projects and areas in Logseq, and then anything else that is not tagged with project or area is basically a resource. So in my personal graph, you will see me use video / and then the name of the video, or article / and then the name of the article, or book / and these slashes are called namespaces. So if you want to dive deeper into this wonderful world of hierarchy in Logseq, as you can see here at the bottom, this is done using namespaces. For now, not important. For now, we only want to create a query to retrieve the things that we have saved. So I write /query to start with the query code. And we want to fetch all the blocks that have the 4 identifiers. So it has to be a to-do for Logseq, has to contain the link newsletter and the link resource. So it needs to meet all of those 4 conditions. So I want to look for all the blocks that have and let's see, area slash Logseq, and the hashtag newsletter, and the link resource, or the hashtag resource. If I click here, if I click out of the query, you see basically all the blocks that have both, like all three of these links, they will appear in the query. There's one problem. If I say, okay, I've mentioned this resource in a newsletter and I mark it as done, it's still appearing in the query. I don't want that. I only want these resources to be up to date. So I need to add another argument or another filter, basically. So I want to see only, and I'm opening a new value, I want to see all to-dos that are in the value or in the state to do. So I click out of this, still 7 results. But now when I click this, and I will open this in the sidebar, when I click this result, May 10th, it disappears. If you see here at the right, it will be the result is now strike through. But see what happened. By clicking on the checkbox, it became done. So it's no longer a to-do in the state to do, it's now a to-do in the state done. And I can say this basically the same way. I can say, I want to see all the to-dos that are done, and then I will only see this one result. I can click it again. Now it will become a to-do again. So no results in this query. This is basically queries one-on-one. But this is what I use. This is what I used to create a list of the resources that I've collected. And it will look through all of my graphs. So even if I have not written this on the journals page, it will still fetch all the how do you say it, all the resources. But let's say I only want to see the resources that I've collected in the last week. So here I'm going to use the between. Here I'm going to use the between. So I want to see all the results between 7 days ago, so minus 7 days, and today. So it will start looking 7 days ago, and it will look at all the journals pages up until today. So I click out of the block, and now we only see 4 results. Now we only see May 4 through May 10th. Today it's May 11th. So this is a way to narrow down your search, basically. The way I would use this is, for example, when I have a weekly meeting with action points, I will then use this between filter to only fetch the action points from the last week. So I'm not repeating myself. So that is the main idea. Let's see if there are questions. There are no questions. So we'll move on to the last part, because now we have set up a query that will basically always update for us. So it will always have a first list of resources. Now the question is, how do you actually write the newsletter, or how do you write that update email? I like to use a single page as a workbench, as you've already seen. As you've already seen here in area/Logseq, this is basically a workbench page. So it's all the stuff that is related to Logseq is here. If I go to this newsletter page, and I'll also open it up in the sidebar. So here you will see I have the heading, the resources, I have a draft, and then in between, like what I do is I basically have every heading will for the newsletter will become a header here, and then I nest all the stuff underneath. But let's get started first with fetching the resources. So there are a few ways to do this. Let me go to this query that we just built. And there are a few ways I can do this. I can basically drag these to the page. I can also just right click and I say copy block ref, and then I sum them up here. So as you can see here, I've now referenced this block. And then from here, I can even mark it as to do. And I need to disable something, the tooltip, which is very, let's see, these. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Sorry, a little bit of maintenance. So I can basically say, oh, I want to copy the block reference of this block because I want to mention this resource. Here we go. So that is one way. Another way is I can just drag it from, should be able to drag it from the query directly onto the resources page. That is what I normally do. I prefer to write this way, or to manage my resources this way. Why? Because for these resources, for these links, it doesn't matter where they live. So I don't want to reference them needlessly. In the case of, for example, meeting notes, you will want to retain those meeting notes on the journals page because the date has meaning to it. So in my case, as soon as I drag the resources from the journals page onto this page, the meaning doesn't really change. Whereas if you have your meeting notes there, they took place on a specific day. So in that case, you might want to block reference the notes or the resources or whatever you want to share instead of actually dragging them over. And then it's very simple. So I would open this up. I would open up the draft in the main page, and I would just go. So for example, here, goodies from around the web. I've already created here some things, but let's say I want to write about this. So I open it in the sidebar. It's a YouTube video. And then I just write a new heading. So comparison of Logseq and org Rome. I add the video here, which I will later copy paste into Ghost, which is the publishing platform that I use. And then the blurb of the newsletter goes here for the newsletter. So that is basically the process. And then once I've written this little blurb, I just mark it as done. And then I just work through this list. It's simple as that. So I create basically a workbench. To recap very quickly, I enter resources, notes, whatever, via the journals page. I retrieve them using a query, and then I bring them onto a specific page from where I'm actually going to use those notes or resources. And that is basically the main workflow in all of this. So always drag your blocks around however you want. You can always block reference them, so it doesn't really matter where they live. But I like to combine them on one page and then use the sidebar to very quickly have everything next to each other. I hope that makes sense, this process. All right. We're running out of time, at least if we want to do a Q&A. I want to quickly show you how to export stuff out of Logseq. So there are a few ways. So the simplest way is to right-click a heading and select copy as. So for example, if I say, well, this is a header for the newsletter, I just go header by header and I select copy as, and the screen will open with basically the note or the branch as Markdown. So Markdown, if you're not familiar with it, it's a way to mark up text. So make it bold, italicize it, add links using just plain text. As you can see here, this part is bolded because it is wrapped by these two star symbols on either side. And it's a level 2 heading because of the 2 hashtags in front. So that is basically how Markdown works. I can just click here, copy to clipboard, and then I go into, this is our publishing platform that we use for the Logseq blog. And I would just create a new post, newsletter number 2, and I paste it in here. As you can see, the bullets will come along. So this can be very annoying, and I think we should, so this is just me thinking out loud about our functionality. I think we should have an option to remove the bullets and then turn individual bullets into proper paragraphs, because the issue now is, as you will see, when I click copy as, I can say indentation styles, none, but then you see everything is jumbled together. What I would like to see is, for example, a white line between the individual blocks. That would really make it easier. Hopefully soon. But for now, let's take an actual example from the newsletter. Let's see, because then you get a better sense of how it exports. So let's see. For example, new plugins and themes. Copy as. I copy it whole, no changes. Oh, wait, I should have the indents because that makes it easier to. All right. And then see. So as you can see here, every paragraph will have a bullet in front. What I normally do is I just remove it manually and then I restructure it. Doesn't take much time, but it's a little bit of work. It takes normally just a few minutes. So obviously, if you're in a hurry or if you don't like manual work, there are some other ways. So I can go into the Logseq folder and see Logseq Advanced. I have the pages here. And then I can open, let's see, this is the first newsletter. I can open basically the Markdown file directly. And this is Sublime Text. And using Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code or Text Soap or whatever, you can basically do find and replace operations, quite complex find and replace operations. I'm not going to show that now. I'm not a champion in find and replace, but definitely look into that, because you could basically you could remove the dashes and then introduce line breaks and clean it up very quickly. So that is another approach. For as long we don't have some better export capabilities. All right. And then let me see. I think that is everything that I wanted to show. Yeah. So exporting from Logseq, as I've shown, you click a heading, right click, and then do copy as, copy to clipboard, and then paste it into a publishing platform. This works because Logseq uses Markdown. What I just pasted into is a platform called Ghost, which also uses Markdown for its editor. So I can go into here and just use the same, this is bolded, and use Markdown. I can create a heading like I just did in Logseq using double hashtag space. This is a second level heading. So it's very useful to know some Markdown. Obviously, when the editor that you use doesn't support Markdown, then this will not work as well. So in that case, I recommend you use maybe the HTML export. So you still click on the bullet of the parent block, you select copy as, and then you choose HTML. HTML works very well. So I can just use this, copy to clipboard, and I can paste it into Word. I can paste it into Outlook. I'm not sure if it would work if I would paste it into Gmail. I haven't tested that, but you can take the HTML and create an HTML email, basically. Also using Word, it's very easy to remove all of the bullet points very quickly. So you just select all the text and then remove the bullet points. So that is basically the approach. So in the case that you use Markdown, a Markdown editor, use text. If you send out something via email, via Outlook, or in a Word doc, use HTML, copy this HTML code using this button, copy. So copy to clipboard. And then you have everything formatted the way you had formatted it in Logseq. All right, some questions from the chat. Jose is asking, why Ghost and not Logseq Publish? Few reasons. Currently, Logseq Publish is quite involved. So if I want to publish something, it requires several steps. The way it exports is also basically you export a Logseq graph. Although nowadays there's something called Logseq Schrödinger, I think. Let me see the marketplace. Yeah, Logseq Schrödinger, which is a Logseq plugin to export to Hugo. So if you know Hugo Static Site Builder, you can export your graph to really nice looking Hugo website. The reason for us to use Ghost is we also have a newsletter. So Logseq Publish does not have newsletter capabilities built in. Whereas if I go to Ghost, I can click here, publish. And it's not just publish, I can also send it. So in currently we have 885 newsletter subscribers, and I can send it directly into their email box. So that is why we use Ghost. Personally, I also love Ghost. It's just an awesome platform. The writing experience is great. So I fully recommend it. It's also open source. You can run it yourself on a very cheap DigitalOcean instance. Costs like $5 per month to get started, and it's a single click install. So very, very cool solution. Hopefully over time, Logseq Publish will mature. We have plans to actually do a community bounty. So look for developers in our community to develop a plugin to make it easier to publish your Logseq graph. But obviously, in our case, we need newsletter functionality. So that's why we're sticking to Ghost. Let's see. Jose is asking a follow-up question. So the dance with bullet points would be avoided if you use Publish. If you use Logseq Schrödinger, so the Hugo site builder, it removes the bullets. So this page is created using Logseq Schrödinger. So as you can see here, this page is completely written in Logseq, but it doesn't have any of the bullet points. So really nice solution, if you ask me. This is something we'll definitely be looking at also for our own documentation, but we will want to have a little bit of a different theme. The upside is Hugo themes are very easy to build, so we could do that. Jose, I don't know if the internal linking is retained. You would need to ask Sonhi in the Discord. All right, what else? Charles is mentioning, I've tried exporting with the Hugo plugin and the PDF export. But I have references, so the hashes instead of the content in my exports. If I'm not mistaken with the PDF export, this should be resolved in the latest version. So just make sure that you, when you install something, and then once it's installed, you need to hover over the plugin and then check update. So look at that. For Schrödinger, I don't know if it is already like it already translates the block references from the hash to the actual content. But that is something you should ask Sonny, and I'm just going to look up his his Discord username very quickly, because he's very active on Discord, and always willing to help and really listens well to feedback. So if you're on Discord, this is Sonny's username. And Diego is mentioning there's an extension called DocView Exporter, which allows you working with hidden bullet points on Logseq and exporting it directly to HTML. So this, let's see. Yeah, so this is what you've mentioned, the DocView Exporter. I see. Oh, it's also in English. So let's see. Yeah. I don't know exactly how this plugin works. Oh, wait, here. So this is to go into document mode. So you can use this plugin to go into document mode. And let's see, this is to export, and you can export directly to HTML. That is very neat. So basically you will have a nice looking page in HTML, which you could directly publish if you want. And here in the demo, we see you can also just save it as PDF. It's a little bit of a workaround, if you ask me, because nowadays we also have the PDF exporter. So I like this one. This is also by Sonny, which is the PDF export plugin. And as you can see here, you have a lot of settings here. You can hide page properties, you can hide brackets, you can set some custom CSS, so you can really style your documents when you export them. So if you have some kind of branding that you use for your company, or maybe even you write an entire ebook in Logseq and export it via PDF, this is how you can add your own flavor to it, your own layout. Let's see. Other questions? No other questions, and we stayed within the hour. That's freaking miracle. Normally I go way over time. Let's see if there. We'll just open it up. Any questions that you have now? I saw a question before about machine learning capabilities. Mirko was asking that. I don't know if he's still here. Yeah, Mirko, could you expand either by raising your hand or in the chat what you exactly mean by machine learning abilities in Logseq? I can then answer that. But to already give basically a little bit of a view into what we plan to do with Logseq in regards to machine learning. So a few things that we're considering. Obviously, we already have some very basic natural language processing, which have shown with the between filter, for example, in queries. That is a very simple example of the most basic natural language processing capability. So you can write in natural language, and then it will turn it into links that can be used by Logseq. So that is something we want to take further. We've also been looking into elicit. So we really want to make Logseq a tool for learning and research. We're very popular in the academic community. So one example of integrating elicit would be, for example, to come up with research questions. So you can ask a question, and then it will generate follow-up questions, for example, for research based on the elicit engine. So that is an example we're looking at. And what else for machine learning capabilities? Automatic linking is, I think, also something we're looking at. I've heard some some mentioning of maybe automatically suggesting other blocks as you're writing something. So for example, you're writing in a block and then you press a shortcut and then you get blocks that are somehow could be related possibly. So we are looking for several ways to enable this. Obviously, we don't want to bog down the core app. We want to keep the core app very lightweight. So it might be possible that we enable this as a plugin, or that we sponsor community contributors, community developers to build this. Something else, I see Jose mentioned performance when searching. So Jose is saying, I moved from Ample with about 5,000 nodes, and I suspect some blocks are too big and match many searches. So any known solution? Yeah, so as I've shown, you can open directly the markdown file using some other editor. So that could be a way. If you find a block that is very long, there is also a plugin called Split Block. So you can, for example, say splitting multi-line text into blocks. Let's see. So this is, for example, one block with multiple lines, and you run the plugin in there and it will cut them up in individual blocks. So that is a possibility. As for the performance itself, we are about to release a really big performance improvement. So that is very close. We're also revamping the editor. It's all because we are working on real-time collaboration. So for that, we had to revamp the editor quite a bit, but then in the process, we also found some ways to improve performance by a lot. Also, the indexing of the blocks and things like that should be way faster in the future. So the main improvements will be for long pages and for pages that contain a lot of links. So normally the best practice is to cut up longer blocks of text into smaller blocks, but then also to distribute basically over the blocks over multiple pages. So namespaces could be useful, but as I've just shown, in my case, my workflow is I like to dedicate to an entire page to one area. So I had area/Logseq, but then I have also area/Logseq/newsletter. So that is a way to cut up longer pages. Hopefully in the future, that will not be necessary anymore, because the performance will improve so much that you can basically have thousands of blocks on a page without any problem. That is basically what we need to do. Oh, sorry, I was not sharing my screen. So the plugin I was mentioning is called Split Block. So as you can see here, you can run the plugin when a block has multiple lines, and then when you do Split Block, it'll basically turn every line into its own block. So that will definitely be useful. Obviously, you need to run this on a per block basis, but for very long blocks that tend to end up a lot in your search results, this will be a useful plugin. All right, and the hour is up. And there are no more questions, it seems. So I hope me rambling for an hour was useful. I noticed as I was talking, there were so many things that are very obvious to me, all the steps in this process, because I've been doing it for so long. I hope it was useful and that you could follow along. So just to close off and see what we talked about today. So we first talked about why write a curated newsletter and why use Logseq for this process. So frictionless entry, very easy to retrieve your notes, and then quite easy to export your notes. In my case, it's very easy because I don't care that it has some bullets in front of it when I copy paste it into Ghost. It also forces me to double check the structure. So that is not an issue for me. And I hope that we can very soon improve the copy as menu, that it will be even better. Collecting resources we talked about. So what are resources? Can be basically any type of content that you want to share. How to collect resources using templates on the journals page, making sure that queries can find it. And then we talked about templates to ensure queries being able to find the blocks that you enter, using a few tags or properties. So in our case, we looked at the 3 tags: area/Logseq, newsletter, resource, and then the property was the to-do. And then retrieve notes. We wrote a query that looked for those 3 links and the 1 property. And then whenever we marked something as done, it would go out of the query. So that is basically a way to keep an always up-to-date index. I would say a query, in this case, a query is very much a dynamic index. And then writing the newsletter. And I noticed that I haven't really spent too much time on the structure, explaining the structure. So let's go back. I like to indent stuff because why? I can very easily hide things. So I can now collapse this heading and all the notes underneath are hidden. But also in this way, because I have more levels, I can also say, well, I have the title of the resource, and then underneath I nest it. Obviously, depending on how you, and again, I'm not sharing my screen, I realized. So I like to indent a lot. So I have my heading, I have the text, and then I have the name of the resource. And obviously, when you write like this, for copy pasting into Ghost, this works perfectly because it doesn't indent indefinitely. It only uses 1 indentation level. So I only have to remove 1 bullet every time. Depending on the platform where you export this to, you might need to have everything on the same level. So for example, if you use Logseq Schrödinger, the Hugo site builder, you basically would need to have everything on the same level. Oh, we need to have everything on the same level, like this. So no indentation. That is basically how you would need to do it in some other instances. Again, play a little bit around with the tool that you use to export to. Maybe you will need to use the copy as HTML. So for example, if you use Word, if you use Outlook, so play around with export formats. And then finally, we talked about, I should keep sharing my screen. And finally, we talked about, publishing. So exporting and cleaning up the export. All right. Sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen, the last part when we were reviewing. Charles is asking, what will happen with the 4.1 million? So for those who do not know, about 1.5 weeks ago, we announced our first investment round from a big group of investors. We got a total funding of $4.1 million US dollars. How we'll use it is by building our team. So we are open source projects, but we want to be focused on the core app, on basically the core must-have functionality. Obviously, the question arises, how will we make money in the future? Will the app stay free? And to that, I can say, yes, the app will stay free. Our monetization strategy will be pro services. So if you're familiar with Obsidian, that is a model that we're leaning towards. So Obsidian, the tool, the app itself is free. It's not open source Obsidian, but the tool is free. And then the pro services, so in their case, the publish and the file sync services are paid. So that is something we also want to do. We are currently building file sync. We're also building real-time collaboration functionality, and those will be in a pro plan, basically in a monthly or yearly subscription. You will not have to use that if you don't want to, but it will solve many of your problems if you do. For example, if you use Logseq on multiple devices, for example, with iCloud now, sometimes people run into issues with syncing or sync conflicts and they get duplicate notes. That is not because of Logseq, that is because of the way iCloud works. So with our own sync service, real-time collaboration, that will be a thing of the past. You don't have to choose for it. You can also run your own cloud service like Nextcloud, WebDAV. So like that will all still be possible, but that will be our way of monetizing. And for now, we are really looking for people to, like we have a good engineering team, really good engineering team, but we want to build our product team a little bit more and our front-end team as well. So we're really looking for front-end designers and engineers currently, and we're actively hiring. So if you're looking for a new gig and you want to work in a remote company where you have a lot of freedom to work on what you want to work on, then definitely reach out to me. And Jose is asking, would that mean multiplayer Logseq? Yes. Yeah. I don't know on the permissions and groups and stuff like that, but multiplayer Logseq, that is definitely one of our main focuses right now, because we also use Logseq for collaboration, increasingly so. So we still use like other project management tool for our sprints, namely Choir, which we use, which is basically also an outliner, but built for teams and developers. Our dream is to have all that functionality directly within Logseq. But for that, obviously, we'll need real-time collaboration, because currently how we do things is we have everything in a private GitHub repo, and we have to sync that. So we have to push changes and pull changes to get the newest nodes and to push our nodes, which is less than ideal, because obviously merge conflicts can occur. Lots of things we're learning from that, also about best practices to work in a collaborative graph. So even though if there are no merge conflicts, there's still some best practices. On the blog, we'll write way more about that in the future. So we're also planning to share our lessons from working with Logseq. I want to thank everyone. We still went over time a little bit answering the questions, but I hope it was useful. I think I should do another office hour soon, and then maybe we can also talk a little bit more about the future of the company. So what are our plans with this investment round? What is our vision? So what do we want to work towards? And then also have a little bit of talk about future features. So I hope that could be useful. All right. I want to thank everyone for your questions, for your comments. I see Alex helping out in the chat. So thank you, Alex. And I want to wish everyone a great day. Bye.